Montana Territory, autumn of 1879. The wind ran cold through the pines east of Bozeman, cutting sharp and fast, like it remembered the winter coming. Elias Thorne stood at the edge of his cabin porch, staring out over the land he had not left in over a year. His hat sat low over his eyes, but the grief still showed in his jaw tight, unmoving. The cabin behind him creaked gently in the breeze, the same way it had the day he and his wife, Lorna, finished building it with their own hands. She had died inside it 1 month later. He never moved the rocking chair she loved, never took her coat off the peg, never lit the second lantern. He lived by routine now. Chop wood, tend the horses, ride the fence lines, sleep. And some nights he did not even do that. The sound came faint at first, hooves quick and uneven. Then the crash of branches. Elias stepped off the porch, rifle in hand. He did not raise it, not yet. A horse broke through the trees, rearing back. A woman tumbled off the saddle, hitting the ground hard. She stayed there, gasping, until Elias moved toward her. "Hey," he said, crouching beside her. "You hurt?" She lifted her head, hair tangled, face scraped, lips cracked from wind and dust. "I think I'm lost," she said, voice hoarse. "I did not mean to trespass." "You are not trespassing," Elias said, already noting the bruises along her arms, the torn hem of her dress, the look of someone who had not eaten in a while. "You alone," she nodded. "I have been for days." He helped her sit up. "Name, Vera Kline." He waited, silent. "I was headed north," she added, "but the wagon was taken. My brother is dead. I got away with 1 horse." Elias looked toward the trembling animal. "That horse will not carry you far now." "I know," he stood. "Come on." "You need water." She hesitated, then let him pull her to her feet. Inside, the cabin smelled of pine and cold ash. She noticed the single chair at the table, the unused second cup on the shelf, the quiet that seemed too full to be peace. Elias handed her a tin cup of water. "Sit where you like." She did, her hands trembling as she drank. He waited until she finished before asking, "You from around here?" "No, Kansas. My brother and I were trying to reach Spokane. He heard work was good there." "What happened?" Her eyes dropped. "We were stopped near the pass. 3 men, they took everything. He fought back. They shot him." Elias's jaw worked tight again. He nodded once. "I have not seen anyone since," she whispered. "I just kept riding." "You have a place to go?" "No." "Family?" "None left." He rubbed the back of his neck. "You can stay the night. Tomorrow you can decide what comes next." Vera looked up. "Thank you." Elias nodded again, then moved to stoke the fire. She watched him, solid, quiet, heavy with something she did not understand yet, but she knew it lived here in this cabin, same as he did. That night he gave her his bed and slept near the hearth. She whispered, "Good night," into the dark. He did not answer. By the 3rd day she could walk without limping. Her bruises faded. She still flinched sometimes when the wind hit just right, or when a hawk cried out overhead. But she helped. She swept the floor, cleaned the pans, brushed the horses. She did not ask to stay, and Elias did not tell her to leave. "You were married," she said one morning, when he handed her a jar of preserves from the cupboard. He stilled. "Yes." "Is that her coat by the door?" "Yes." Vera did not ask more, but that night when Elias came in from checking the traps, he found the coat freshly brushed and mended. "You did not have to do that, I know." He stared at it a long time. One afternoon, Vera followed him out to the barn. She leaned against the post while he repaired a stirrup. "Why did you not leave this place?" she asked. He did not look up. "Built it with her, could not leave it behind." "I understand." He looked at her then. She nodded. "I had a fiancé once, before the war. He never made it back." Elias's hands stilled on the leather. "I thought I would never love again," she said quietly. "I think I stopped hoping for anything." He met her eyes, steady. "Me too." The next week, snow fell early. Elias chopped twice the wood. Vera made stew from what little they had left. They ate together in silence, the warmth between them growing in the quiet. One night she stepped outside after supper. The stars were sharp above, the trees black and still. Elias came out behind her. "Cold," she nodded. "But peaceful." He stood close, too close not to feel the heat where their arms nearly touched. "I never thought I would feel safe again," she said. "You are safe here." She turned to him. "I know." He reached up, slowly brushing her wind-blown hair from her face. His hand lingered at her cheek. "I do not know how to begin again," he said. "You already are." He leaned closer. She did not move away. Their lips met quiet, careful, like testing if the world would break beneath them. It did not. When he pulled back, she touched his chest, right over his heart. "You are not alone anymore, Elias." His hand closed over hers, and for the first time in 2 years, something inside him eased. Not finished yet, but something had started, something real. By early November, the earth wore frost like a second skin. The stream slowed, the horse's breath steamed white, and the forest quieted beneath the weight of coming snow. Vera took to wearing a scarf. Elias gave her a pale woolen thing tucked away in a drawer, still wrapped in brown cloth. She never asked whose it had been. One morning, while splitting kindling behind the shed, Vera paused and looked toward the ridge. "Does anyone live near here?" she asked, wiping her brow with the back of her sleeve. Elias set down his axe. "Nearest ranch is 6 miles west, widow and her boy. After that, nothing till you cross the river." She nodded slowly. "I've been thinking. If I stay through winter, I'd like to work for what I use. I can sew, and I'm good with mending tack." He considered her a moment, then said, "There's a loom in the back room. It belonged to my mother-in-law." "Never used it." Her eyes warmed. "I'd like to see it." That evening, he cleared the room for her, brushing off dust, setting the loom upright, oiling the parts that had dry rotted from disuse. She ran her fingers across the frame like it was a sleeping animal waiting to wake. "How long since someone wove here?" she asked. "More than 20 years, she turned to him. "Then it's time." Each day after chores, she returned to the loom. Elias would pass the doorway sometimes, hear the thump of the shuttle, the rhythm of thread tightening into shape. He didn't disturb her. One night, she came to the table with a narrow length of cloth folded neat in her arms. "It's not much," she said, laying it down, "but it's warm, enough for lining gloves or a collar." Elias picked it up, rubbed the fabric between his fingers. "You've got a good hand." She smiled, but it was quiet, like something still settling inside her. Later that week, Vera stood in the barn loft, sorting through old tack. The light came in through a crack in the boards, falling across a saddle too fine for the trail. "This was hers, wasn't it?" she asked, holding up a silver-bit bridle. Elias didn't answer right away. He leaned against the post, arms folded. "She rode better than I did," he said at last. "Taught me to sit a horse straight." Vera set the bridle down gently. "Would you ever want to ride that trail again?" He looked at her, something unreadable crossing his face. "I don't know," she nodded. "If you ever do, I'll ride beside you." Days shortened. The fire burned longer. Elias started cooking breakfast without asking her first. Vera began leaving one of the chairs pulled out at night, as if she meant to return to it. Neither of them mentioned it. Then came the day she did not come in for supper. Elias found her near the stream, kneeling on the bank, her hands cupped around something in the water. He walked closer. "What is it?" She looked up. A fox, young, caught its leg in a trap someone left behind. He knelt beside her. The animal shivered in her lap, its fur soaked and clumped with blood. "Can you help it?" she asked. "I can try." They carried it back between them, wrapped in her shawl. That night they sat by the hearth, tending the wound together. The fox's breathing slowed, its eyes closing. Vera's hand rested near Elias's on the blanket. "You didn't ask why I went out alone," she said softly. "I figured you'd tell me if you wanted to. I needed to know I could." "Needed to feel the woods weren't hunting me anymore," he nodded. "They're not." She looked at him, firelight touching her face. "Neither are you." It took a moment before he said, "I'm not sure I know how to be anything else. You already are." He reached for her hand, slow and sure. Her fingers curled around his. The fox stirred once in its sleep. Outside, snow began to fall. The frost deepened. By December, the snowdrifts reached the bottom sills of the windows, and the pine trees stood quiet under their heavy coats. Inside the cabin, the air stayed warm from constant fire, and the scent of cedar smoke clung to everything: blankets, hair, hands. Vera stood by the window with a basin of water cooling in her palms. She watched the gray sky, her breath soft against the glass. Elias was outside, fitting a new latch on the shed door. He worked without hurry, the set of his shoulders easier than it had been weeks ago. When he came back in, he left his gloves by the hearth and unwrapped the scarf from his neck. "Wind's picking up," he said. She nodded toward the door. "You fixed that latch," he hung his coat. "Owl tried to nest in there. Figured I'd better seal it proper before it gets bold." She smiled without looking at him. "Smart owl." He gave a short breath. Or just cold? She set the basin down and dried her hands. I was thinking about dyeing the cloth I've been weaving. There's wild indigo growing near the ridge if I can find it under the snow. You want to go now, tomorrow, if the weather holds. He pulled another log from the stack and fed the fire. I'll come with you. She turned to him. You don't have to. I want to. The next morning they left early, Vera carrying a basket, Elias with a small axe and a length of rope. They walked single file through the trees, snow brushing their boots, breath hanging between them. Did you ever trap up here? She asked, stepping over a fallen branch. Only for food, he said. Never liked fur trading. She glanced over her shoulder. You ever think about leaving Montana? No. Why not? He adjusted the rope on his shoulder. I know this land. It's not always kind, but it's honest. She considered that. I never knew a place could be both. They found the indigo under a copse of bare shrubs, leaves curled and blue beneath the frost. Vera knelt and brushed snow from the roots with careful fingers. This will do, she said. He crouched beside her. You know how to make the dye, my mother taught me. We used to color our dresses with it. He watched her work in silence, then asked, what was she like? Vera tied the bundle of roots and tucked them into the basket. She had strong hands. Always smelled like lye soap and cinnamon, never raised her voice, but when she looked at you, you listened. Elias stood and offered his hand. She took it, rising slow. I think she would have liked it here, Vera said. Then she had good sense. They walked back together as the wind picked up, snow blowing soft across the trail. That night, the cabin filled with the scent of simmering dye. Vera stirred the pot carefully while Elias sat nearby, sharpening a blade on the whetstone. Would you ever want someone else living here? She asked. He looked up. You already do. She met his eyes. I mean, more than just staying through the storm. Elias set the blade down. I don't want you to just wait out winter. Vera moved to the table and rested her hand beside his. Then say what you do want. His fingers curled around hers. I want to build a life again, not out of what was, but what's here now. She nodded, slow and sure. Then let's do it, together. He stood and drew her gently into his arms. She rested her head against his shoulder, the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. Outside, the snow kept falling. But inside, something had begun to root, quiet, certain, and no longer alone. The new cloth, dyed with wild indigo, hung drying over the hearth, its deep blue catching the firelight in shifting shades. Vera touched it as she passed, checking its weight, then moved to the table and began sorting through a small tin of buttons and scraps Elias had given her from an old trunk. She was piecing together a lined vest for him, something warm for the shoulders, stitched strong enough to last through March. Elias came in from the woods near dusk, a light dusting of snow caught in the fold of his collar. He set down a bundle of kindling and brushed his hands clean. I ran into someone at the low ridge, he said as he hung his coat. Trapper from over near Gallatin. Said he's seen tracks of 3 men riding southwest, 1 horse dragging. Vera looked up from the table. You think they're the ones? He nodded once. Could be. Said they were carrying too little for men coming from town. Told me they were asking about Trail Forks, might be moving toward Butte. She stood, shoulders stiffening. Will he go after them? He's heading back east, no interest in trouble. Just passed word along. Vera folded the cloth she'd been working on slower than needed. I don't want to carry them with me anymore, not their names, not their shadows. Elias stepped closer, resting a hand on the table. You're not bound to them, you walked away. I ran. Then you lived. That's not weakness. She met his eyes, steady now. I want to stop looking over my shoulder. I want to plant roots, make things that last. You already are. She exhaled, a long breath that carried something heavy out with it. Then I'll finish that vest, and after that I want to make curtains. Real ones, something with color. He smiled with his eyes more than his mouth. That'd be nice. They stood there a moment, not touching, but close enough to feel the shared quiet between them. Then she went back to her stitching, and he lit the second lantern without thinking. Later, she laid the vest across his chair. He ran his hand over the seams, then looked up. You know, he said, I never thought this cabin would hold laughter again. Vera sat down across from him. You never thought it would hold me. No, he said. But I'm glad it does. She didn't answer right away. Then, will you teach me how to handle your rifle? I want to learn. He leaned back, studying her. You planning to shoot something? I'm planning not to be helpless, he nodded slowly. We'll start tomorrow, you'll need a steadier coat. I'll line one of mine. That night, they shared a single cup of tea, passing it back and forth without speaking. When she stood to bank the fire, he rose beside her. I've been thinking, he said, voice low. We could build another room come spring. Something with windows on both sides. For weaving, for whatever you want. She turned to face him. Do you mean that? I wouldn't say it if I didn't. She reached for his hand, fingers sliding into his. Then yes. Let's build something together. Outside, snow settled thick and undisturbed. Inside, the warmth held steady, and the space between them had nothing left of loneliness. The wind shifted in mid-January, blowing low and steady from the west, carrying the dry scent of pine smoke and far-off creek water under ice. Vera stood in the doorway with her shawl wrapped tight, watching Elias string a line between two trees for drying hides. She didn't wave. She didn't have to. He glanced back once and gave a single nod. Inside, the cabin was changing. She had sewn new curtains a dusky rose using the last of her fine cotton. She'd hung them the day before, and now the firelight caught in their folds, softening the room. The second chair at the table bore signs of regular use. A notch in the wood where Elias rested his boot, a folded cloth where Vera had stitched a tear in his coat. When he came back in, she was bent over the loom, working a pattern of tight diamonds into a wool shawl. I saw traces of an elk herd near the south ridge, he said, brushing snow from his sleeves. If the weather holds, I'll track them tomorrow. She didn't look up. Have you hunted elk before? He leaned against the wall, unfastening his belt knife. Once, with my father. We followed one for 2 days before it gave out. Did you take everything you could? We used every bit. Tanned the hide, boiled the hooves, rendered the fat. He wouldn't let me waste a thing. She pulled the shuttle through the loom. Then I think he taught you well. He watched her weave, quiet a moment. Then, what did your father teach you? She paused. To keep a straight back. To read a man's eyes before his words. And to leave land better than I found it. Elias stepped forward, drawing the curtain back to look at the slow-falling snow. We've both buried a lot behind us. Vera set the shuttle down. That's true, he turned to her. But I don't want to keep walking backward, do you? No, she said. I want to make a place that remembers, but doesn't ache. That night, she lit a beeswax candle and wrote a letter. She didn't say to whom, and Elias didn't ask. She folded it neatly, tied it with thread, and placed it in the trunk beside a wooden comb and a dried sprig of lavender. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Vera packed a satchel of bread and dried apples while Elias checked the rifle he'd cleaned the night before. Before he left, she handed him a strip of dark blue cloth. For your wrist, she said. In case the leather wears thin. He wrapped it without a word and kissed her forehead, the first time he'd done so without hesitation. He returned 2 days later with a quartered elk and a scraped shoulder from a fall. She patched him up with a firm hand and didn't ask for details. Through February, they worked side by side without ceremony. She salted the new meat. He carved hooks for drying. He taught her the balance of the rifle, and she showed him how to mend a broken treadle on the loom. They shared meals, shared the same wooden bowl for stew when the others cracked from cold. They no longer separated their sleeping blankets. One night, after the snow stopped and the trees stood dripping like thawed candles, Vera sat by the fire reading from a worn book she'd pulled from the trunk. Elias leaned back against the hearth, one boot crossed over the other. I want to marry you, he said. She lowered the book. Why now? Because I'm ready to say I want a future, not just a season, not just a place to wait out grief. Vera studied him, her gaze steady. We don't have a preacher. I can ride to town come spring, or we can speak vows to each other beneath the pine. There's no wrong way if it's honest. She closed the book, stood, and stepped toward him. Then say them now. He rose, took both her hands. I vow to be your shelter, your partner. I won't walk ahead or behind, only beside, she nodded. And I vow to build with you, in silence or in song, in storm or peace. He leaned down, pressing his forehead to hers. Then we're already wed. They slept that night with the door barred, the fire low, and the world quiet around them. By March, the thaw was slow but sure. Vera planted early greens in a box by the window. Elias began sketching rough plans for the new room, carving them into a scrap of pine. One evening, Vera brought out a folded shawl, the diamond-patterned one, now finished, for the baby, she said. He looked up, startled. She didn't smile. She simply placed his hand on her belly. He knelt, pressing his cheek there, breath catching like he'd stumbled into sunlight after a long tunnel. They built the new room together. It took longer than planned, but neither minded. They filled it with woven cloth and homemade shelves, a hand-carved cradle, and a rocking chair Elias shaped from hickory. The child came in late September, a girl with a quiet cry and dark hair like her father's. They named her Laurel, after the mountain shrub Vera had seen blooming the spring she first dared walk alone. They never left the cabin. There were trips to town, of course trading cloth, buying salt, meeting neighbors. But the home they made stayed rooted in that clearing, beneath the tall pines and wide sky. Elias taught Laurel how to ride. Vera taught her how to mend. She grew up with her parents' quiet strength braided into her days. And every winter, as the snow came down and the fire burned steady, Elias would look across the table, see Vera with her hands wrapped around a mug, and know without doubt, without ache, that peace had come to stay.